Hello and welcome back to my cake kitchen. My name is Gladys, and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. Also, I create baking tutorials live, like the one we're making today, where we pick up a baking objective, get through the bake. I hand you several tips and techniques, and also discuss my ingredients listing, the intention behind it, and give you more information about it so that you can undertake your own bake confidently at home if you choose to use this recipe. So this evening is no different. We're back here to bake a simple chocolate cake. Now, this chocolate cake is not new to the channel at all. I have baked it time and again, and in fact, I've created it into a long form edited video, which I mostly reference to when I'm using it, except earlier on in a live where we made this Russian chocolate buttercream. We also completed the base liquids for the chocolate cake, for which the buttercream is going to be used. As a result, I thought to just complete the process, I'll come back and bake the cake so that we will be done with it. Hopefully this will develop into a long series where we see the start of the bake as we did earlier, get through it, and then finish the cake, which I hope will be a layered semi-naked cake, 2 tiers that's stacked up. I look a bit uncertain right now because the cake is actually for my son, whose birthday is in a couple of days. So I get to change my mind when I want to. But in the immediate time, the goal here is to bake the chocolate cake so that the information is available for you to refer back to when you need it. So if you want to see how I made the liquid base, it essentially takes this chocolate cake recipe essentially takes after the one pot method, where you create a liquid base and then add it to dry ingredients, except this is anything but one pot method because we simmered all the ingredients on in a saucepan on simmering heat, brought it to a warmer temperature where all the ingredients were homogeneously mixed together, including the sugar and chocolate pieces and all the other things we added. We left it to cool because we couldn't use it warm. Using the liquid base warm might cook the eggs, so I left that, got on with my day, and now it's time to bake. If I wasn't creating this as a live video, I'll probably be baking here by myself in the evening, but it's great to kind of bring you all along. So good evening, good day, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's a pleasure to have you on the channel. And yeah, without having to waste your time, let's get straight into the baking. But whilst we're at it, earlier on in the bake, when I was undertaking the making of the chocolate base, the question of cost and ingredients and providing quality and the nuances of cake businesses and how customer interest impacts the prices of cake and all of that came up as a whole conversation. Much of it is in the other video, but I did promise in that, because okay, let's take it back a little bit. When I was deriving the base, so I'll probably try and work whilst I'm talking to you so that when we finish this part, I will explain better, because this mixer is a little bit loud. So once I turn the mixer on, I won't be able to talk over it. But in the earlier live, right now, that's no good, is it? In the earlier live, I had a Chantilly P, hi K, how are you? Right, in the earlier live, as I was deriving the liquid base, it included a few ingredients, with the base being Coca Cola, which is a base liquid. You can replace it with any other liquid. To that I added some butter and a few other ingredients. Right, there was someone in the chat who was interested in using the recipe. It was packed with so much tips and recommendations to get the best out of it. It's a bridge between a sponge cake and a chocolate mud cake, but it is somewhere in between, where it's not super dense, but it's not light, but it's flavorful and super chocolatey. It's an adaptable recipe where you can change ingredients without affecting your outcome adversely. So if you swap ingredients around depending on what you aim to achieve, you can get a great flavor, which means you get your chocolatey, intense, flavorful chocolate cake, without that being affected adversely. Because if you don't have an adaptable recipe, it's probably better to stick with a precise ingredient without changing things around, unless perhaps you're adept or have some knowledge about the science and how ingredients affect each other. So I talked through all of that, and there was a watcher in the chat who wanted to use the recipe but generally was concerned about the amount of ingredients that I used because that ultimately affected cost. Now, I did say I was going to come back and give some listings of exact price ingredients and probably give you a generalized view of how much the recipe will cost in terms of the quantity. So that led to a conversation about cake prices and serving customers and what intentions may affect what you are serving to customers. So I did have quite a bit to say in that video, but what I'm going to do is we're going to get through this bake, and then we can talk some more about the ingredient listing and the price connected with the ingredient listing, how that ultimately affects cost, my intention around why I'm using it, and overall view of what, say, a business owner, what may influence your choices in terms of ingredients and why you may or may not use certain ingredients, and probably ways for you to mitigate your costs where applicable, and also look at ways that you can bring value without driving down your cost too much, because depending on who you are serving, there are some prices that may just not apply to cake. Sometimes I think home bakers, we have it hard, because I did speak about the perceived value of cakes, which are driven down because people generally don't see how much value goes into a cake, because everybody's nana bakes at home, so they think that being a home baker just means you're at home just whipping, adding butter and sugar together. So there's a whole context to home baking, running a home-based bakery, the business of baking itself, and what skill comes into play, hence what you're serving to customers, and possibly how one can market themselves in order to be able to drive the prices. Now, that's a larger conversation to have, which is what we are not trying to have today, because that requires like a proper sit down and an entire spreadsheet of information, which I am not trying to do, but I'm just trying to add on to what I spoke about earlier, reassuring the watcher in the chat, and also bringing you some valuable information, especially if you're a beginner who just wants to have some idea about what it will cost to derive a particular recipe, the intention behind it, and what you can do to help yourself if you just don't have a clue. Because I do appreciate that when you're a beginner and you're starting, whilst it is useful to get your stuff right by getting your numbers, your cost, and all of that right, it can be overwhelming to start with. So I just wanted to bring a holistic view to this recipe, how much the quantities here will derive you in terms of layered cakes, if you try to transition that to cupcakes, and also have an idea about how much it costs for this particular recipe, just so that you can make an informed decision on whether this is something that you want, or you might want to use a different kind of recipe. So I have my dry ingredient here, which is flour, self-raising flour in there. To that I have added half a teaspoon of baking soda and a quarter of a teaspoon of baking powder, a pinch of salt, and some cocoa powder. Now I will put the exact did I? No, I didn't. Actually, I was going to say I did put the quantities in the community post, but that is not for the cake. I'll put the cake information in the description box when I go back to after the session. But for the chocolate buttercream we made, I have provided all the details, including yield, which I responded to in a comment section. So there's all that information there. But with this dry ingredient, we have cocoa powder in there, a pinch of salt, rising agent, and self-raising flour. Now, if you've been on this channel, you'll find that when I use self-raising flour, I normally don't add rising agent, but this particular recipe is very heavy on the liquid side, so adding a little bit of rising agent tends to kind of lift it up without making the cake a little too dense. Now, before I go on, there is Dolly in the chat. There is Letabo. Is it hello, all of you in the chat? I am terrible with names. I almost have to look at it and think about what I'm pronouncing. So if I don't call your name out, please forgive me. But there is Dolly. Dot, how are you? How are you today? Are you done with work? And there's Chantilly. Chantilly, I know she's Katie. Katie Ann. Katie, how are you over there? So right. Okay. I'm gonna get myself a bowl. So we have the dry ingredients here. We're going to be adding some eggs in a bit, but first I'm going to just put that in here. If the machine starts going, the mixer starts going and I am quiet, bear with me. That is simply because the mixer is a bit loud and I can't talk over it. Saif, I am making a chocolate cake, which I am going to put in these tins. They're going to be layered cakes. Now I am hoping I can get like maybe a 3-inch rise, which I will level and slice together so that it will make 4 layers of cake filled with the buttercream. But at this point in time, I don't know yet. Normally this recipe will bake 4-inch deep in my 7-inch cake pans, but I'm using 8-inch cake pans, so that is going to be slightly different, but we will find out in the process, right? So we are making some chocolate cake, so I'm going to just let this on slow. Whilst that is mixing, I am going to add, this is 6 eggs that I have already beaten. Before that goes, I'm going to scrape it in, because sometimes with this butter, the mixer can mix from the side and leave the inner parts. So the thing about this butter is it can be awfully messy, but otherwise I'm scraping the side so that all the dry ingredients will come together. It is a fairly simple recipe to put together. Feel like I've gotten that side together a bit over there, and I'm going to put that back and with that, the rest of the liquid ingredient goes in. right, all of that is mixed. I see, Vivian, you're back. So if you missed the earlier part, Viv, I was saying I've come back to finish the chocolate cake, and then we can talk some more about the ingredient listing, the prices for that, so that you can have a general understanding of how much it costs to put this kind of recipe together. Of course, that is not going to include the time, but at least it will give you some generalized ideas about that. I have literally kind of had a whole monologue about that. So hi Viv, good to have you back. Yeah, right, our butter is done. I like this chocolate cake, but it can be awfully messy. Oh, okay, so I'm just gonna, right, so let's move this to the side. Yep, this over here. And these are 2 8-inch pans that have already been lined. What I've done is I've gone ahead and put liners in them on the base, and so I don't measure these, I just eyeball it because it'll give me an idea about how much is needed. So let's see. Okay, so 2 8-inch. Okay, right, we have enough in each. Okay, so we've managed to derive equal amounts of butter into 8-inch pans. So I have been preheating the oven at 170 degrees C. This is going to go in for anytime between an hour and 15 minutes, and we'll have to keep an eye on it and see how that comes along. This should rise okay, and I should be able to slice both so that it gives me 4 layers. That stacked with buttercream would give me up to about 6 inches of cake. It's like I said, the cake is for my son, so I have absolute control to decide what I want to do with it. But I don't want an overly huge cake. He's not going to be having it with a large group of people, but we're taking it to a gathering where he can share it. So I just want to be able to make sure that there is enough servings to go around without overwhelmingly having too much cake that is unnecessary. All right, so I'm going to put that in the oven. Okay, this will not work. Reason being, I haven't unplugged this, but before that, let's get the cake in the oven first. Right. And let's keep an eye on the time. It is exactly 6 minutes past 10. So perhaps let's say at 10 minutes past 11. Are we going to be here for an hour? Okay, let's see how that works. It's not like we haven't done it before. We actually have, so it can be fun. As long as I'm delivering value, or perhaps we can leave the hour go and come back just minutes before. But if you've never been on this channel, one of the things I try to do is that on a live like this, we undertake the bake so that you're part of the experience from start to finish, so you can get to see how much goes into making. Okay, so the mixer is out of the way and our cake is in the oven. We need to keep an eye on the time, which is 6 minutes past 10. So in an hour's time, which should take us to 10 minutes past 11, that is if we're still here, we should be able to check on the cake and make sure that let me just make sure I've got the temperature there right. Yeah, I'm a bit paranoid about that. But hello again. If you're in the chat, welcome to the channel. Some of you have been with me earlier today when we made the liquid base. It's the immediate video before this one. If you check on the homepage and check on live videos. So if you want to see how I made the chocolate buttercream, which is Russian chocolate buttercream. Actually, whilst before we talk about the cake and the ingredients, something interesting. Those of you who were still on the live from earlier, or if you're watching this on replay, I think we finished the bake about 2:30, isn't it? 2:30, and it's been a little bit warm today in the UK. I think the weather temperature, I can't remember, but it's a little bit over 20 degrees, and it's been a little warm. The sun hasn't been too out, but it has some warmth in it, which means when I left my butter out before I made the buttercream, 30 minutes in and the butter was getting soft, so I had to put that in the fridge, which came out for the buttercream. Now, I say that, I reference the weather to say, weather is one very impactful thing on buttercream. That if your buttercream is not stable, if you leave it out at room temperature and it's warm, it is going to melt and it's going to be unstable. So I intentionally left this butter after making it from 2:30. It's literally been sitting here on my countertop. Delaney, hey. It's been sitting here on my countertop since I got it done, and this is about 2:30. And actually, whilst we're at it, let me just confirm what the weather temperature here has been today. Right, I am not so clued in. Well, this evening is about 17 degrees C, but earlier on it was a little warmer than that. And I've left this buttercream sitting out on the countertop, and this is what we have. It is fairly soft, but I'm surprised by the fact that it hasn't fallen apart. I should get a spatula that will give me a proper right. So it's held on its own and it has stayed stable since. Now, is this super stable for you to say you can leave a cake at room temperature at this weather? I don't think so, but it's not as bad as, say, for instance, French buttercream. If I had left my French buttercream for that duration of time, as I have done this, it would completely melt and look really soft and will not hold form. Whereas this continues to hold some form. So I say that to say it seems like it has held pretty well, and that is because the ratio of butter that was used with the condensed milk has proven helpful in this context. Much of the information about the ingredient listing, the yield, and that I have left in the community post. But just for generalized information, this quantity is about 1,200 grams, which is 1.2 kg, the quantity altogether. The ingredient listing is already on the community post. And actually, in the previous video in the description box, you'll find the details of that. And I have gone ahead and provided information about the entire method. So if you don't fancy watching the entire video, you can skip to the bottom and check the process so that you have a generalized idea about how to derive the buttercream. But it's also important for you to watch the video itself because it provides you with in-depth information packed with tips to help you get the best out of making this buttercream. I did say the intention for choosing this buttercream was because I was looking for a less sweet buttercream because it's going to be for children. I didn't want the buttercream to be overwhelmingly sweet. And my son is very particular about that. He likes all things chocolate, but he's super particular about the kind of chocolate and how intense it can get for him. So his previous cake, which is similar to the same one, was filled with French chocolate buttercream, which is a French base chocolate buttercream, and then that is upgraded into a French buttercream as a base, and then it's upgraded to chocolate buttercream by adding that chocolate ganache to it. I have already gone ahead and created a video using American buttercream as a base, but towards the end of the video I show you how you can make the same buttercream using the same method but replacing the American buttercream with French buttercream. So that is already up on the channel, which I hope you can go check later and find some value from it. So because my son is very particular about the taste, and I just wanted to be able to reduce the amount of sugar that went into the cake, I also didn't want to, I just wanted to time manage. That's also a consideration in my decision making, because of course if it was for a customer that would be completely different, but it was for my son and I have a lot of things happening, and I thought, how can I save time for myself whilst also delivering value and great tasting cake to the child? So I looked at my buttercream options, and rather than go for my usual buttercream options, which in this case would naturally be Swiss meringue or French buttercream, I thought, what else is outside of this category that I can choose? So I have tried Russian buttercream in the past. It's a recipe I kind of have an understanding of, but I haven't taken the time to kind of look into it and talk about it in detail, especially on this channel. But it made an appearance on my cinnamon banana cake, just slightly with some generalized information over there. So today I thought we'll stop and get this done properly. But key to this recipe today was that instead of using chocolate pieces, which I normally like to use because of the mouthfeel it guarantees, I swapped that for cocoa powder in this particular recipe. I should say my concern for this buttercream was more about the mouthfeel, because I was using cocoa powder, and also the milky aftertaste. Now that is not anything to worry about, because having left the buttercream to sit out for a little while, later when I came to taste it, what you feel is just intense chocolate. The sugar is all reduced over there because the buttercream itself, not the original recipes, do not actually add sugar to it, but Russian buttercream doesn't require you to add sugar. But for me, I add a bit of sugar to balance the taste a little bit. And for this, I think there was about 50 grams, 50 grams. The information is out there for you to check, of icing sugar to it. You don't taste the sugar, and the milky aftertaste is nothing to worry about because the chocolate literally eclipses that. And what you have is just an amazing aftertaste of just intense chocolate. I will encourage you to try this if you're a beginner looking for a cost-effective, easy to make, very not time consuming kind of buttercream. But like I said, some of these buttercream may have all these highlights, but they also fall short of stability. And even though it has sustained well in the weather, stood against some of its superior counterparts like your Italian and Swiss meringue buttercream, or perhaps American buttercream, stability may be a little short on this one. So that is a bit of information and context to this buttercream over here. It's great. Now, what do I do with that? Now, let's talk some more. Let me get this out of this. Now, let's talk some more about the ingredients that made the cake. We're waiting for the cake to bake so I can tell you the yield of it in terms of layers. Now you can go ahead, because I poured it into the tins I was using there. Over there in the tin is 8-inch 4-inch deep, but I filled it a little over 2-inch. So let's say if it bakes up to about 3 inches, that is okay. And then if I level and layer it, you'll end up with a stack of 4 cakes. I won't know until it comes out, so that is just something to bear in mind. But the quantity that I used here works out something like, I'm just going to run through some of the numbers because I do this all the time and I have an idea about how much the quantities are. If they are not as exact and precise as I would like it, I'll go ahead and derive that information in its totality in the description box when I come to optimizing the description box. So bear that in mind. So don't quote me on it, but I'm going to try and give you the generalized guidance to this ingredient recipe and the yield, and in terms of cost, how much you're looking at. And that is simply because, like I said earlier, Vivian, we were discussing this because Vivian raised the subject of cost and how that impacts prices for customers who may not be willing. So over here, I had specifically 500 mils of Coca Cola as the base liquid. Now, the Coca Cola I chose here was very specific. Normally, because this recipe is very adaptable, you can choose any Coca Cola from Dr. Pepsi. Is it? From Dr. Pepper to Pepsi Cola to Pepsi Max, it really doesn't affect anything adversely, right? But specifically for this one, I went for caffeine-free Coca-Cola, and that is because it was for kids. So I opted to have the caffeine-free one. Now, that is around where I live, that can be difficult to get, but thankfully, my local shops had it, which I picked up, and it came up to about £2.60 for the 2 litre bottle. So for the 500 mils, the cost was somewhere about 65 mils. That is 65 pence, you know. So that is just the calculation. Now, don't try to derive all of that. I'll try and post that information specifically on the community post and in the description box as far as this video is concerned, so that at least you have that information. But this is just to give you a rough guide whilst we wait for the cake to bake. So for the 500 mils of a Coca-Cola, that for 2 litres was about £2.60. The price here is about 65 pence for the 500 mils that was used. The butter I used here, yet again, I did say the recipe is adaptable. You can replace the entire quantity of butter with vegetable oil, but I wanted to maintain some flavor, because between butter and oil, butter maintains a superior flavor and gives you a nice texture to the cake as well, because it holds together, whereas oil can give you a very nice moist cake. It can be dense also, and because this recipe is very liquid heavy, I just thought I would enhance the flavor by maintaining butter instead of swapping it out for oil altogether. So we have about 350 grams of unsalted butter here, and for the butter, my local shop had them on a discount of or a price match of about £1.69 per 250 gram pack. Now, that's not the most expensive in terms of butter. In fact, when I've sourced my butter from Costco, you're looking at £3.45 for the 500 gram pack, the 500 grams. So for 250 grams for the price of £1.69, that is not exactly steep at all. So for 350 grams of butter, I think for the price we're looking at £2.37 exactly for that price. So add that to the 65 pence, which is for the Coca-Cola. And then we have cooking oil. Now, the cooking oil was the Flora Pure what do you call it? The Flora Pure vegetable oil, sunflower oil, right? And that was the 2 litre pack. Now, for the 2 litre box, you're looking at, I only ended up using how much did I use? 150 mils, because the total quantity of fat in this recipe is about 500 mils or 500 grams. That's if you're using butter. So that came up to about, for the oil, about 35 pence. So we have 65 pence for cola, we have £2.37 for butter, we have 35 pence for oil here. So Vivian, this is literally giving you answers to your questions, right? And actually handing you the information. I did say that I will come back and break down the price of the ingredient. The chocolate bar was the Fincari brand from my local Lidl, which has gone from the usual, I think 48 pence to 85 pence for 100 ground pack. So that came up to 100 and, is it £1.70. I keep going 170. No, it's £1.70 for 200 grams, which went into this recipe. And then we have brown sugar. Now the brown sugar was very generalized because I had bought this a little while ago, the one that was used here. Plus, I chose to swap some parts of the brown sugar for golden brown sugar, which affects price differently. But say if I stuck with brown sugar or granulated sugar, the amount here, which is about 800 grams in total, comes up to something between £1, something about 95 pence or to £1.15, and I've kept the price range of that. So for me, because I use the caster sugar, the golden caster sugar and brown sugar, the total price of sugar in the recipe was about £1.10, and then sour cream was about 85 pence. And then there was what, flour. Flour was about 65 pence for the quantity I used, and then there was eggs for the amount quantity I used. That it's about £1.61. Now I know if you're watching here, this is just a boring crunch of numbers, and half of the time I don't even care to talk about these numbers. But like I said, I was just looking to answer this question specifically for anyone who might just scratch their head and wonder what it will cost to derive this particular cake, minus time, running cost, and other incidentals that generally affects the pricing of the cake. So I just want to make clear that I am not exactly pricing the cake as of this moment in time, because that's not the goal here. The goal here is just to give you an idea about ingredients recipe in the recipe and how much it will cost, so that you make an informed decision on whether this is an ingredient listing or a recipe that you might choose to utilize or not. But having said that, when I added it all, for instance, when you think about, say, your leavening and vanilla and all of that, I mean, if you think about the types of vanilla I use here, which are these two brands that I use. I picked this up from Amazon. When I used to buy this from Costco, I think it was about $15.99 for the 274 mil, 473 mil bottle here. But on Amazon, this is about £24, if you like. It's about 23 something. But that doesn't also account for the fact that I pay for Prime $8.99 per month, so I get this delivered without postage fees. And if it included postage fees, this could be easily £25 easily. Now, to derive how much exactly it will cost per say table or teaspoonful, you have to literally be able to estimate how much the quantity of teaspoons you can derive from this bottle. So for stuff like this, including leavening agent, what I do is I just add a standard price. I just add a standardized price, which is about between this and the leavening and a few bits and pieces, including salt. So standard 50 pence that you add to the cost of the ingredients here. So I say all of that to say, that's quite a boring thing to say. I say all of that to say, for this specific recipe, you're looking at two 8-inch pans that have now been put in the oven, and that should yield 4 layers. You're looking at about a specific price, a minimum price, considering the fact that this recipe is adaptable. So if you thought, okay, you didn't want brown sugar, you swap it for granulated sugar, which means that you pay less than you would require to pay for brown sugar, because there's a difference in price for brown sugar and granulated sugar. A minimum price for this ingredient listing that I've listed all here, a minimum price is about £8.95, and it can go up to, is it, no, it's not a minimum price is about £8.95, which can go all the way up to, I think, £10.50. And that is because when I was deriving the calculation, I didn't add the cocoa powder to it. So in terms of the ingredient listing, Vivian, like I promised you, you're looking at an easy price of up to about £10.70. Push it to £11 to derive two 8-inch cakes that have baked at about 3 inches deep. What do you think about that? Is that too steep a price, or you think that is reasonable? How much do you think is so expensive? Because essentially working the price out, you're looking at a minimum of about £9.50. And then if I added the cocoa powder and all the other small things that, including this, you can push that £9.50 to about £11, which is an addition of a solid £1.50, right? So we're looking at £9.50 minimum to about £11. That's the cost of ingredients totally. Now that doesn't include the bake time, running costs, incidentals, and the price of a cake is generally influenced by a business plan and business objectives of a particular business. So many things will affect the price, including how efficient they are with their time and equipment. The more equipment one has, the easier it is to derive a cake in a short time. If you have, say, a commercial machinery that will support how efficient you can bake your cakes, whether you bake in bulk, buy your things in bulk. So pricing cakes is a superiorly nuanced subject that I will say, no matter what you see on social media, whether you're watching your favorite creator or a baker who is putting their price up, do not be disheartened by the numbers. It might lead to you questioning your own value or whether you're doing something wrong. Or I think, just here's the reassuring message for you. Pricing is highly, highly nuanced. And most of the time, the factors influencing pricing can be awfully difficult to understand. So, unless a creator is inviting you to the back end of their business practices, including equipment, efficient methods, and all the other variables that affects how they derive their prices, just take a baker's prices at face value. The only person who should be concerned about prices is yourself and your customer, because the customer is going to be paying for the price of the cake. They will need to know, and you will need to know your numbers to be able to deliver value and also get your margins from it. And I think that's all I have to say about pricing, because I find that pricing can be a highly, highly difficult subject and can actually get a lot of activity and conflict. And as a baker, I just try to keep the channel rather positive and happy and informative and engaging and interactive. Let's try and do away with conflict, okay? Because there's so much conflict in our world already. And Chantilly says she believes the price point, which is a minimum of £9.50 to about the £11, seems reasonable. So what do you think? We're discussing the price of ingredients that went into this cake. So if you have any thoughts, leave them in the chat. Let us know. But Chantilly, that is lovely for you to say, and I really appreciate that. That said, what are you doing this evening? I can't believe I've been talking for 20 minutes straight. Right. I need to pick up a charger so that I can stay in this chat with you. Otherwise, I will not be able to see what you're saying to me. So bear with me. I'm going to dip out of the chat a little bit, but stay there with me. Don't leave, and I'll be back shortly. Right, you can see I've been back for a little while now. So, look, it's only 20 minutes. The cake is not baked. Cake is not baked yet. So no matter what I do, we're probably going to have to keep ourselves going for a little while. But yes, Chantilly P, there's quite a few of you in the chat. Vivian. Yes, Vivian is asking if I was talking about pricing. I wasn't talking about the pricing of a cake generally. I'm just talking about the price the cost of ingredients for this particular cake right here. So just in case you missed what we were discussing earlier, if you're new in the chat, we just made a chocolate cake. For those of you asking, we just made a chocolate cake that is already baking. We are, I think, we're about 25 minutes into the bake, and that's going to take about an hour to an hour 15 minutes, but we can check on it after an hour. Just make sure that we are not trying to develop a very crispy burnt cake over here. And I also discussed the subject of pricing ingredients and how that affects anything. So having derived this £11 maximum cost for ingredients, now right, yeah, there's a question in the chat. I'm just attempting to answer that in a bit, but I will probably be talking about how this £11 price also can affect the choices you make in terms of value. Why this is my favorite recipe, why that works for me, and even with the £11 cost, whether one will find that very expensive or not, that works completely for me, and why that is. Now, there's a question of why I use the tins I use, whether I bake all my tins in deep tins. Yes, I bake deep. And it might not be for everybody. If you are using my recipes are optimized for baking in shallow tins. That's when we talk about shallow tins. In fact, okay, so let's nerd out on cake tins, okay? I get excited about things cake. Can you tell? Just okay. So let's Viv, you're welcome. Okay, Viv, thank you. I hope you found some value in the information I derived over there for you, because you know what? Okay, right. Maybe I should get myself a glass of water, don't you think? Okay, I'll get myself some water, and then we'll talk about cake tins, and I'll tell you why I'm just like crunching this whole conversation up here. Okay, I've got myself some water, because I realized that I'm going to be stood here for a whole hour talking about cakes. And I don't think no one really cares. I do. If you're new to the channel, I love cakes, okay? If you love cakes as much as I do, you can leave a heart or a thumbs up in the chat, and let's see if you're with me on this one, right? And whilst you're at it, please do not forget to like the video. And if you're wondering how you can like this video, on the screen from which you're watching this, right? That's assuming you're watching over a phone. That's about all I know. There is 3 dots to your top right corner. If you click on it, it will bring you a drop of options, which has some icons. It includes a thumbs up button. You hit the thumbs up so that we know that you have enjoyed your video here, and it also prompts YouTube to know that there is a valuable video here, so that you can put it in front of other audience who might equally find it useful. That's a no cost way for you to support the channel, and I will greatly appreciate that. So Vivian is already in bed, right? Are the kids gone to sleep? Vivian is a favorite of the a regular on the channel, so she's keeping me updated. Much of the thing about cost and the numbers I was crunching was for her sake. So Viv, yeah, Vivian did say she was going to try the recipe, and she'll give me some feedback on it. So good luck with that, and let us know. Hopefully you can stay on before you fall asleep. But good for Vivian going to fall asleep whilst I'm still stood here talking about all things cake. But back to Chantilly's question. Chantilly is asking if I always bake deep. Yes, I do. The reason being, just because you didn't ask, I'll tell you why I bake deep. I do because it is convenience. Right. Viv, let's let me just answer the questions on ganache when I can, right? Let's stay with the cakes right now, and then I'll talk to you about ganache and callus, okay? But if you have further questions in the chat, leave them and I will answer them as I go along. So Katie was asking about if I bake deep, and yes, I do. I do bake deep, and that is simply for convenience because different objectives will influence the decisions you make concerning your bake, and I like to keep the intention at the forefront. I guess if I was running a large scale business, I will have a specific system that derives efficiency for me. But I'm a custom cake maker, which is very niche, which means that I make decisions about each cake based on customer needs and preferences. So each cake is tailored to each person, essentially. So it's super, super niche. Having said that, the thing that I generally do with my bakes is I bake deep, and that is just for convenience because I can bake deep simply for the fact that I derive my own recipes generally. And if I don't, and I have to source recipes, I source recipes with the intention that they will bake tall and deep for me. And that is simply because even though I have a commercial type oven here, I don't use it often. I only use it for specific occasions. It's not my everyday use. So it is my home oven that sees a lot of the baking. And because the home oven is limited by how many tins I can get in, when I started cake making, I always knew that I didn't want to be overwhelmed with so many tins. So, just so to make it work for me, I opted for deeper things, which means I can level and slice the cake into layers and stack them. Whereas if I was baking shallow, these are 4-inch deep tins, but shallow tins can range from anything between your 3-inch to 2-inch to 1.5-inch, which means if, say, think about this tin here, if I divided this tin into two, one half of it is a whole pan by itself, but it means it bakes 2-inch or less. It is very shallow. I will need a bit more of those in the oven. So baking deep does come with its downsides. The downsides being because they are tall, there's only a certain amount I can put in the oven. Whereas if I was baking shallow tins in a commercial oven, I can put more because they are short. But that means baking more cakes for taller tins. And I just figured that baking deep will still achieve that if I'm able to level and slice the cake into layers. So that's a long-winded way of saying yes, I prefer baking deep, and that is just for personal preference. There's really no specific reason. I won't specifically recommend it for you if it won't suit your circumstances. But say my recipes work for baking deep. I don't have any problems with it. And if you watch the channel, going back to many of the live sessions I have created on this video, on this platform, you'll find that there are so many cakes that I have baked deep and they've come out okay, generally. From the flour series that I created to many of the cakes. And one thing, if you've noticed, that is if you've been here for a little while, you'll find that I tend to create taller cakes. The generalized cake sizes, I guess cakes have developed over time and evolved as well, but cakes normally would have started from very short layers of about maybe 4 to 5 inches tall in height. In recent times, cakes have evolved to 7 inches, 8 inches, to double barrel cakes that stands at 9 inches tall. Now, each cake would suit a particular objective and preference. I just find taller cake aesthetically pleasing for me, and thankfully my customers seem to love it. So I derive my servings based on taller cakes that stands at a minimum of 7 inches. So baking deep tends to support that intention for me, right? But I am not against baking baking shallow tins at all, except I don't have any shallow tins, which is why for this cake that is gone into the oven, I would have wanted to bake it shallow just so that I don't layer it, because it kind of adds a rustic touch to the cake. Like I said, it's for my son. I keep repeating that. I just wanted to go for something rustic without having to finely layer, slice the cakes, right? But I don't have shallow tins, so I've split the batter into two, hoping that at least I can bake it a little like shorter than I normally would. So that is about that with my tins. And by the way, the tins I'm using are the PME, I think anodized tins. In terms of quality, compared to some other ones that are premium brands, this will withhold well. They have served me well. I am really pleased with them. And you can find them on Amazon. In fact, I purchased these on Amazon. I have the 5-inch tin, 6-inch, 7-inch, and 8-inch and 10-inch tins. I don't think I have the 9-inch. So these are the PME anodized tins, just in case you want to know. And I'll leave information about these in the description box for you to check out later. That said, that said, yeah, so supporting the argument for baking shallow, Chantilly, which is Katian. Katian agrees that baking 2-inch deep means you bake more. So now, one way you can make that efficient for yourself, Katie, do you have more shallow tins? Because I guess if you don't have more tins, then it's more work, like baking and separating the batter or waiting for the batter to be done. Do you get what I'm saying? Whereas if you had more shallow tins, say if I had 4 shallow tins, then I wouldn't really bother, would I? Do you see what I mean? So neither one is better than the other. It just all depends on what works for you. But I'll say this about baking shallow: they bake easily and quicker because they are more exposed. It's not technical to bake them, if that makes sense. Baking deep requires a bit of technical knowledge in terms of how you optimize the recipes, because if you don't optimize the recipes very well, then they don't rise and they don't stay, and sometimes you can have issues with the cake not cooked in the middle because of how the heat affects the cooking process in the oven. So I guess baking shallow has its good side. I have just gotten used to doing what I do over here, and it works for me. And so I will recommend, if you choose to go that way, probably stick to the recipes that I recommend. Also, not because they are simply my recipes, but it's because it is what I have used over and over again and can guarantee success for you. But not all recipes out there are optimized for baking deep, because sometimes when you double a recipe, so that it bakes in a deeper tin, you might have problems with how dense your cake will yield eventually after cooking. It means you have to also kind of reset or think about the bake time. So, for instance, if a shallow bake yields a good bake at 35 minutes, it doesn't necessarily mean it will cook a double portion of that in 70 minutes. Does that make sense? So yeah, there are so many variables to think about when you are picking a recipe and you're trying to yield certain results. But for me, my recipes work for baking deep. I don't have any complaints and I'm happy with that. Yeah, hope that helps. Kitty Ann says, right. Okay, so Kitty Ann raises a point about the placement of cakes in the oven. I guess traditionally the recommendation is to place your tins in the middle rack so that it's directly against the heat that comes in. Whew, right. That is helpful information, but there's a lot of things that will influence how that affects your ultimate bake. I'll tell you why. Ovens differ, oven settings differ. And I find that even as bakers, we are still lacking in the knowledge of how our ovens work. I would know because it took me a long time to even understand some of the settings on my oven, and I still don't know all of it. So that is something to bear in mind, that your knowledge and understanding of your own oven, the settings and how it operates, it's something that will eventually affect your bake. Having said that, ovens comes in different forms. Sometimes you have the ovens that bake with the heat coming from the top and the bottom and doesn't have a fan. Whereas I have a convection oven, which means there is a fan at the back of the oven that radiates the heat around the oven when I'm cooking the cakes. And that's just about the basic knowledge of my oven and how it works that I can give you. With that said, with the convection fan oven, I've realized that the placement of the cakes doesn't tend to affect anything in a greater sense. But for just safety and guarantee of better results and yields, because I bake deep, I tend to put my cakes in the middle rack. But I have baked cupcakes right here where 3 racks of cupcakes have gone top, middle, bottom. It is only the middle rack because my rack is such that when you're putting cupcakes in, the bottom one doesn't sit properly. So it literally sits at the base of the oven. I'm literally talking oven floor, which is too far away from the source of heat. So when I've done that, I find that the bottom just yields a little bit lighter bake compared to the middle and the top bake. But at 160 degrees C, cupcakes bake fine, and I just have to turn around and rotate the tray. So, for instance, when that has happened at the 18, let me back up a bit. The cupcakes bake at 20 to 22 minutes. But at 18 minutes, if I'm aware and still attentive, I can just swap the middle or the top rack for the bottom rack, either way. And then at 22 minutes, I have a great bake. So, with that said, I haven't had the adverse effect of the placement of oven. So I can't say for sure that placing the oven your tins anywhere else besides the middle can have a detrimental impact on the outcome of your bake. But of course, if you bake and you know your oven, and then placing your tins in the middle rack works for you, then perhaps don't change it. But imagine if you were stuck for time and you had so much bakes and there's space in your oven. Would you rather just keep your trays in the middle oven and just leave it as that so that you can you can bake more later, or you will space them out? I don't know the answer to that. But yes, ovens do affect bakes differently. Actually, talking about that, for just once, my 8-inch tins in this oven kind of doesn't sit evenly. So today, what I did was, when I put the oven, I put one on the top and I put one on the middle. So we'll probably find out in real time whether it will affect anything. So actually, that is something to look out for whilst we are at it, right? Delaney is asking if I'm still on a live. Delaney, I'm still here. I was waiting for you, honey. Okay, so for those of you in the chat, we're talking all things cake. We're talking the ingredient pricing for our chocolate cake that is in. We spoke about the Russian chocolate buttercream and how stable it has remained. We've talked about cake tins. Vivian was talking about how to get her Ganache colors deep. Vivian, I'll recommend that you have a look on the channel. I have created some videos on the use of Ganache. I think there will come a time where we will tackle the subjects of Ganache, but I would want to ask how you derive your Ganache, the ingredients you use, and why you have difficulty coloring it. Because until I understand that, I can't make generalized information that will suit your circumstance. However, what I'll say is that Ganache can be tricky to Ganache can be easy to color, but can be tricky if you don't know what you're doing. For me, I derive my Ganache from using white chocolate and cream. Not fresh cream. I use parts of fresh cream to the cream substitute, which is Elmley. There's a reason for it. I've spoken about that in depth in other videos. But the intention is I'm optimizing for making sure the ganache remains stable when I boil the cream. Whereas fresh cream gives a nice mouthfeel. It can be a bit tricky. So I mix both and then I add it to my white chocolate. The recipe I use is generally the 1:3, the 3-to-1 ratio. Sorry, the 3-to-1 ratio simply is a guide. I've said time and again on this channel, there's no one specific recipe of ganache that works for one specific cake, but the general guidance is a 3-to-1 ratio for white chocolate, which is that 3 parts of the chocolate to 1 part of cream, which will make sure that the ganache is stable and steady and will guarantee a very solid cake. But in extreme weather conditions, you can raise the ratio of white chocolate to cream. And in the past, I've gone depending on what cake I'm deriving. For instance, my 3D 3-layered cake top forward, the structural cake, I raised it to 4-to-1. But at 4-to-1, you have a solid consistency that you can have problems with the finish of your cake. That is just a bit of information on the back end of ganache. But saying that, generalized, if you stay with the 3-to-1 ratio, that is 3 parts of chocolate to 1 part of cream. So for instance, if I had 300 grams of white chocolate, I'll add 100 grams of cream to that, put it in the microwave at 2-minute intervals, as in 2-minute intervals. Anything between 2 minutes to 3 minutes, you get it melted, mix it together, and that's white chocolate ganache literally done for you. Now, if you wanted to advance that, there are so many things you can derive, but let's just stay with the basic formulation of white chocolate ganache. With that, if you wanted to color it as red, you want to be able to choose your colors carefully. So for instance, deeper colors are always difficult to derive in terms of whether you're wanting buttercream or ganache. Mouthfeel is really important to me. So coloring buttercreams and ganache, I have to be a little bit cautious. But let's stay with coloring your ganache red. I will go for color options, brands as Sugar Flare Extra Red. It's a paste color. It works brilliant. So at the point of making the buttercream, who is talking buttercream? At the point of making the ganache, which is what I've just talked to you about, you can then add the paste and mix it together, leave it to set. Next day, whip it, and then you have red buttercream. Why am I talking about buttercream? You have red colored ganache. Now, Sugar Flare Red is like for optimum deep red color, but an equivalent brand you can use is the Pro Gel, which is a tube color, oil-based color that colors ganache brilliantly. If I wanted a deeper red, I wouldn't go for, I like color meal, but I don't use color meal for when I'm looking for a solid red or black color. No, I would rather stick with the Sugar Flare extra as in extra black or extra red, or Pro Gel. In fact, I would say Pro Gel has been my go-to for coloring ganache and for solid colors. And talking about solid colors, if you check my edited videos, long form, you'll find I've made a green ganache cake, I've made a solid red ganache cake, I've made different ganache cakes, and the color preference I use there are Pro Gel. I only ever use color meal. Like, one thing doesn't work for all things. So Pro Gel I employ for, say, if I'm looking for a subtle pink color, and if I'm looking for a color without wanting to affect mouthfeel. For instance, Pro Gel is superior in quantity. You can use a little bit to derive the color you want, and because it's oil based, it doesn't interfere with the consistency of your ganache at all. Whereas if some of your brands do not mix well with oil, then of course if you add them into your ganache, you might end up having consistency issues. But the brands I have recommended work well in ganache, and you shouldn't have any problems. But I think if you go back to my shorts from a year ago. I think I had a 6-part series where I take you from how I make my ganache right through to how you color and use ganache in deeper colors such as black, navy, and red. So, Vivian, that is a bit of information there to help you about ganache. Right, Vivian, if you like to leave in the chat how you make your ganache, that would just give me an idea about what problems you may be having. Okay, and Vivian says she used Emily too. So I mean that is kind of a good thing. Whilst we're at it, I can't believe it's coming up to an hour since I've been stood here mouthing off about cakes, right? So if you're just joining the chat, don't forget to like the video, please. It helps YouTube recommend the video, and it's a lovely way to support the channel. That is, if you believe I am giving you value. I can stand here and talk about cakes all day, my people, because I love cakes. Did you know? Anyway, let me just drink some water, and we're coming up to an hour, so we'll be checking on our cake in a moment. Okay, the cake is coming along just fine, and I'm sort of excited about that. I kind of think, let's, okay, right. The cake is coming along okay. It has risen well. I'm quite surprised by how much it has risen. It's actually risen the 4-inch deep altogether. So what I am going to do is I am going to put a foil because it's an hour in, and just when I checked, the middle is a little bit jiggly. I don't want to overbake the cakes. So a good thing would be I could go ahead to mitigate some of the problems that may occur with the cake by covering the top with a foil so that the heat stays trapped in. By so doing, it means the cake can still bake deep in lesser time other than taking longer than necessary, because I don't fancy being here for another hour. Okay, so let's see if we can solve that problem, and I'll come back and answer Vivian's questions about her ganache over there. But in the meantime, if you have other issues about cake that you want to leave questions over there for me, I'll be happy to answer them. Interestingly, I can't seem to find where talk about I can't seem to find where my foil is. So I might just not. Where is the I can't find where the foil is. So let me see if I can find my greaseproof paper, and then we might probably use that. And I can't find my greaseproof paper. And if I did decide that I was going to look for this, who has this happen to them a lot when they have something in front of them and they're looking for it? It happens to me a lot, especially with my phone. Some days when I am doing a live, right, I'll finish the live and then I'll go and sit in my lounge, and then something goes off in my brain and I'm like, oh, I can't find my phone. And then I'm going ballistic in my own house looking for my phone whilst it is sat peacefully on a tripod in the kitchen. So we have found the greaseproof paper. But Katie Ann, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You know what? I get excited coming on the lives here, and I get excited because I get to share something I am passionate about with you, and I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, enjoy the fact that you take pleasure in joining me here. You could be doing many things with your time, but you choose to come into the chat with me, to stay here, stay engaged, interact, have fun, and support me. I am intensely grateful for that, and I do not take that for granted. So, as best as possible, I just want you to get the best out of the experience here, which is by answering your baker related questions, recipe related questions, because once upon a time, these were things I wanted answers to. And it seems like in this day and age, you can look, you will find all information if you seek them, but more than anything, where necessary, you can get the information by just being helpful also, which is what I hope to bring here. So as much as we have fun over here, I never forget that this is not like we're not here for the sake of just being here. You're here to kind of learn something that will improve your outcomes for baking at home, and I just hope that that is the simple value I can continue to deliver. So if you appreciate the information you get from the videos, I am incredibly grateful and happy. My single job and promise is done over here. With that said, let's go back in there. It's an hour and 3 minutes. Remember, the cake went in at an hour and 6 minutes. So yeah, it went in at 22.6. It's now 23.3, which is almost an houring. Because I baked it in a 4-inch deep tin, it has risen. I saw it earlier, so I'll bring it back out. We're not done yet, but we'll see. Because we were talking about how the placement of cakes in the oven, whether you're putting it at the top, the middle rack, or bottom, can affect your outcome. I did put one at the top, which is closer to the ceiling, the oven ceiling, and then one right in the middle that is facing directly into the convection oven. So let's take them out, observe what the bakes are looking like, and then swap them around. But I'm going to cover each one of them with greaseproof paper just to seal in the heat so it doesn't take longer to cook, because these are baking a little deep, and we just want to make sure they don't overbake and they don't take any longer than we need, because sis, I've got to leave here soon, okay? Right. Oh, I've literally burnt my finger. I'm not happy. Okay, so clearly we have some outcomes here. I can't stop to talk about it a lot because that will affect the results of the bake. So I'm just going to wrap them up quickly, and then I'll talk to you about what I'm observing here. So watch the one I am wrapping up first. And this is the second one. let's not forget I bent my finger over here. So let's talk about outcomes in there. We are an hour in exactly in the bake, and the cakes are baked from the outside in, but the middle is a little bit jiggly. So follow me on this one. The first one that I covered, that was the cake that was on the middle rack or the middle shelf, and I would have thought that would, because that is getting direct heat from the fan, it would bake quicker. And it turns out that is the one that is a lot more uncooked, and it's more jiggly on the top of the cake. It really looks like it's coming up slowly, whereas the cake that was sitting on top of the oven has literally baked on the sides, and there's just a crater in the middle that is a little bit soft, which is the second cake, the one. So what I've done is I have just normally at this point, to reduce the risk or to mitigate the risk of overcooking, because cakes cook from the outside in. So if the outside is cooking, depending on what sponge it is, and the inner part is looking a little bit soft, it can lead to overcooking the edges. Now, if I left it in as I've done to cook in time, maybe an hour and 30 minutes in, an hour and 40 minutes in, it will be cooked. But as of this point, an hour in, the outside, as in a third of the outside, is already done. So I'm trying to mitigate the risk of overcooking the outside whilst the inside is still cooking along by, normally I would put a foil on the top, and what the foil does is it keeps the heat trapped in, which encourages the cake to cook evenly. But I can't find my foil, and going to seek the foil out will leave us here. So what I've done is I've tried to replace it with greaseproof paper. It is the first time I've used greaseproof paper, so I don't know what the outcome is, but I hope it can mimic the same effects of a foil. I just know a foil, because it is sort of a metal film, it is more solid and it closes well, whereas for a greaseproof paper, I am not sure. So you know what? We will find out in the chat whilst this is happening. So in real time, what I've done is an hour in, I have just swapped the pans around. The reason being, the oven is not wide enough to take two 8-inch tins. That will be two 8-inch tins, means they will be standing at 16-inch line to be able to go in, and I think this oven is about 15 or 14 inches, something like that. So both cannot sit on the same rack, so one has to go and come down. But generally I don't use the 8-inch tins. I normally would use a 7-inch tin, and where I've used 8-inch tins, I've baked one at a time, or I've just simply transferred the tins to the commercial oven. So this is sort of a new experience that we are finding out in real time, and I hope that is of some use to you. So let's give it another 20 minutes to half an hour, and we'll check. Because we've started it, I just want you to be able to see the finished look of the cake altogether. But back in the chat, so back in the chat about Ganache, Vivian has used all the brands, the Pro Gel and Sugar Flare, as I recommended. Yeah. And yeah, Vivian is concerned about my bent finger. Oh God, I find that my fingers are a little bit desensitized to the heat, but now and again I get bent and I have to worry about that. But if you're new in the chat and you don't know what we're doing here, my name is Gladys. I bake cakes. I love cakes. I do all things cake on this channel. And today, right now, we're baking some chocolate cake. And we're trying to solve some problems about chocolate cakes, whilst also discussing cakes as a subject altogether. I have been going on about an hour now, so let me take a sip of water. Without having to cough. And to say welcome again to the channel. Okay. I don't know why I'm excited. Like, I love cakes. I talk about all things cake. So whilst we're at it, Vivian, I am sure we will catch up more on the subject of my I'm sure we can catch up more on the subject of ganache later if you want. Um, Americala. Okay. I have not used Americala before, so I am quite limited on how that affects anything, but I'm sure we can talk about um, we can talk about hi Chris. That's that's somebody in the chat. Hi Chris, and all you new people who are chancing into the chat, hello there. It's a pleasure to have you. So anyway, whilst we're waiting for our cakes to bake, can we talk about vanilla? It's funny that I once upon a time I threw my toys out of the pram when I bought this vanilla over here, and it didn't meet my expectation, and I had went to a whole rant about it, and now it is one of my preferred vanilla. But the difference is that this is a vanilla blend. So the difference between a blend and vanilla extract itself is that this has parts of vanilla extract in it, but it has other additional ingredients. Note that. So some of the ingredient listing is so long that you think, where is the vanilla at? But I prefer this for specific recipes. It's not, I don't use it for all my cakes and recipes, but it works for certain recipes. And my preferred here will be the is it the Costco what's yeah, this one. I think I already have an open tin. Okay, yeah, I do go through a bit of vanilla here. Yeah, Costco. Oh, okay. So yeah, this is my preferred vanilla to use, just in case you want to know. And right, that's really done. The funny thing is, even after baking the 8-inch cakes, I've got to come back tomorrow and bake 2 6-inch because we're making a 2-tiered cake essentially. So yeah, there's more cakes to come. I wonder if I should start making the base right now, or I should be doing something else now. That's me kind of thinking out and thinking about what I should be doing. But whilst we're at it, yeah, let's have a look again at how. Well, it's only 10 minutes in, so let's see. I've bent my finger again. Oh, something is wrong here today. Oh, I bent this one, now I bent that one. Okay, let's see. Let me wash my hands with cold water. Okay, now we can check the cake and see. Right. Oh, okay. The cake is baking. It's baked well. Normally they say if it comes out a little bit wet, it's fine, but I would rather have a dry center. I love this chocolate cake recipe. I won't lie. It is so good. It is chocolatey. It is flavorful. It's a good chocolate cake, even if I say so myself. Okay. Okay. So let this go back in the fridge, in the oven. I'm going to be careful not to burn my fingers again. I think what I need is oven mitts. Okay, there you go. I think what I need is oven mitts. And whilst we're at there, I think it's about time. Yeah, Viv, thanks for reminding me. I think I just wanted to make a point about how stable this buttercream is, but the point is done now. So let's get that in the oven, in the fridge. I say put that in the oven. Like, why should it be in the oven? Who in the chat is so particular about their ingredients, buttercream and butter? Who is so particular about not wanting to waste anything? Okay, so we are going to wrap this in cling film, and I am going to put it in my isolated fridge. For now, I'll put it here, but I'll move it into my exclusive baking fridge, which is over there, later. Leaving buttercream to settle in the fridge for a day or two enhances the flavor and taste profile as well for you. And like I always say, when you're saving buttercream, you have to make consideration for the space within which it is going to be kept, because buttercream will absorb the flavor and smells of the environment within which it is kept. So you want to make sure that wherever you stay, keep your buttercream, you don't have strong smelling food substances or elements that the buttercream can absorb their smells, really. So for now, I'm sticking this in the fridge over there. And even at the end of this live, I am going to be making another batch of 6-inch cake, just a small 6-inch, so that it can be leveled and sliced into 3 layers, which will become the second tier for this rather simple cake we are making for the young man. Turns out tomorrow is going to be a little warmer. So perhaps tomorrow in the day is not going to be a day to make cakes or to make buttercream. I'll probably come back tomorrow sometime, or maybe on Saturday, because the cake isn't needed until Sunday. So I'll make a decision depending on what the weather is like tomorrow. But yes, my fingers hurt now. If you see me looking away, I'm just looking at the screen to see if I have some questions that I have to answer to you. That's all. So our cake has been in for, it's 20 past now, so it's the hour and 15 minutes mark, but we'll give it another 10-15 minutes and see how that comes along, because we don't want a cake that is wet in the middle, you know. So that is what we are waiting for at this moment in time. In the meantime, yeah, one thing, we are headed for the 5K mark, my darlings. Isn't that exciting? If you're new here, by the way, we are just, I think, about 40 subscribers short of 5K. And we've had discussions on this channel about how we want to celebrate that. Of course, we'll be having a live session to celebrate that. We don't know when we'll hit that 40 subscribers, but as soon as we do, we will come back and we'll have a whole like live to celebrate it. I have some ideas. I don't know, but at the moment, the plans ahead are to have a Q&A, which is a generic thing to do. If you have any ideas about what you would like us to do for our 5K, do you want to leave it in the chat just so that we can honor it? I was thinking, am I? Yeah, we'll be baking something, but I thought I could also cook something. I don't know. That's just my random idea. We'll probably continue the conversation about that in the community post. But at this moment in time, if you have any suggestion about what you want us to do to celebrate in celebration for the 5K subs, maybe leave that in the chat. Let's see if you're here with us. Yes, Vivian is right. Vivian was raising something about the amount of liquid, but the liquid is actually equivalent to the ingredient quantity. It kind of works, so it's neither here nor there really. What has happened is that I know I did lower the cooking temperature earlier, but the liquid in itself, yeah, this particular recipe is very liquid heavy, but it's not it is actually what is required in terms of the proportion, so it is actually equivalent to the other dry ingredients, so it doesn't necessarily mean it is too much liquid than needed. I hope that kind of makes sense. Okay, Vivian concurs to having a Q&A in celebration. So what has for the Q&A, if you don't ask me a question, I have nothing to answer. So maybe you should start leaving your suggestions about some of the questions you would, some of your pressing questions you would like answered. So what would you want? What are some of your questions? If you leave some in the chat, we can continue the conversation in the community post if that makes sense. Whether it's business tips you require or cake decorating tips to recipes, what are some of your pain points? It will be useful for that to be very focused on delivering value for you, just so that you have an understanding of some things that you probably would have otherwise had to either take a class, pay for, or not found easily. So I hope that makes sense. So if you're up for a Q&A, leave your questions in the chat or in the community post. I'll be putting up a community post later, someday before the weekend perhaps, because the 40 mark is coming shortly, and before we see, we'll hit 40 subscribers, and then we'll be 5K, and that will be exciting. But then again, I started YouTube 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. I had no clue what I was doing. I knew what I wanted it to be. I just didn't have the skill. So I have fallen on my face flat a lot, and I have been uncertain on many days. And the subject of wanting to be consistent on YouTube, I've been bitten a bit about that, where I have tried to be consistent and I have failed terribly. And it's been a lot of learning and failing to get here. So I'm excited to get to 5K. And in YouTube terms, that is such a drop in the ocean. But I am still grateful for that number of you who decide to spend your time supporting me and encouraging me and joining me in these random videos where we talk about all things cake. I am always excited to be here with you to undertake a bake, to talk about cake. I've been stood here nearly an hour and a half talking cakes. I don't know if anybody cares as much, but it is exciting. Okay, so thank you for being here. And on that note, if you're still in the chat, and you haven't liked today's video, please do us a favor. Hit the like button. We have a moderator. Actually, we have two moderators. We have Amanda and we have Delaney. Amanda hasn't been here today. Delaney has been in and out. She would have, any of those would have kept you busy in the chat, but they're not here. So whilst we rotate, do consider hitting the like button so that it tells YouTube that you enjoyed the video, and then the video can be put out to other people who will find use in that as well. But yes, Vivian recommends that we have a Q&A for our 5K celebration. We're almost half past, which will take us to an hour and 20 minutes for the time of our bake. So let's get back in and see. All right, moment of truth. Wow, this is a very, very, ooh, wow. Okay, cake is baked. So the hour, 15 minutes hour. Wow, cake is baked. Oh, oh gosh. I wish you could see what I'm seeing. It is a lightly, it is done. It's all done here. And I'm trying to get you to see what's in my pan without having to burn my fingers, right? We have a lightly, and the flavor of the chocolate and the butter is awesome. I mean, oh, right. We made it. When I tell you, this chocolate is really chocolatey. Okay, so there we are. Okay. The good thing about this light is if it works, you're here to see it. And if it doesn't work, you'll see it happen live here. Both gains and failures. The good thing is that at least it's working, okay? We can be sure about that. It's baked beautifully. But as you can see, the cake that was initially put at the top, it has a bit of a crack in it. It is a little bit crusty, just a little bit. But this is more even and softly textured. Either way, it doesn't affect anything. I don't think I'm going to level these cakes. What I'll do is I'll just turn them, invert them, and then they will be flat, and then I'll slice into them. But unfortunately, I won't be able to show you the crumb of this cake simply because it's still hot, and if I tried to invert this right now, it will collapse. So I have to leave this cake to set a little bit. Andrew, thank you for being here. So perhaps a good thing will be, whilst I'm still, the cake is baked beautifully. I don't have any qualms with it. But I would personally prefer this one here to crust up a little bit on the top. That is just me and my toxic baking habits talking. Otherwise, this cake is really done. Both are done essentially. I could leave them to set. I just want this to crust up a little bit because I want the crunchy crust. So I'm going to leave that in the oven a little bit for 5 minutes whilst I clear up, take a few questions, and then we'll wrap up the live. But otherwise, our cakes are baked, done. You've seen the result from start to finish. If you want to see how I did the liquid base, like I said, we have a prior video where you can get all that information. Vivian is asking which cake was placed at the top. Well, initially, this was the cake at the top, right? This was the cake on the top. So it was closer to the ceiling of the oven. And as you can see, let's talk about that a little bit more. Initially, this was the cake at the top. So you can see that there is a crusting on it. There's a break here a little bit. And it's a lot more steady and solid, if you like. And that was the cake that started at the top. I actually thought that this one, which was the cake on the middle rack, would have resulted like this earlier. But turns out when I first looked at this, this was a little soft. It has baked a lot more even, if you like. And it doesn't have crusting on top. So I guess placement matters, but in this case it hasn't affected the bake adversely, so I am not concerned about it at all. But the cakes have baked well, and if you're in the chat and you like the result of our cake, give us a hand clap and give the video a like, because it simply means the recipe that I recommended, the tips I handed, the information have all yielded a bake. So you can leave this chat eventually, taking the recipe with you along the way, knowing that you can bake yourself a cake. And the bake time came up to an hour, exactly an hour and 22 minutes. I gave you a time scale of an hour 15 minutes. An hour to an hour 15 minutes, which means the time is on a scale, which is 1 hour being the least and 1 hour 15 being the max. We went up to 7 minutes more, which isn't bad, because at 1 hour when we checked it, we didn't want to overcook it, which is why I put the greaseproof baking paper to trap the heat and make the cooking a lot more even. So we've ended up not over cooking our cakes. In fact, I like the tender bake we have yielded here. And perhaps if I level them and layer the cake, by the time we are done, we'll measure how tall the cake is and what the results of all of that is. So hopefully you have found some value in this video. And if you have, do consider subscribing. Join the family here for more valuable videos, more informative sessions like this, so you can undertake more baking at home with all the confidence you have gathered from these sessions. Right, yeah, Vivian is giving some context to the top of the oven. I guess because the heat rises in the oven, the top of the oven tends to cook quicker, which is what I have just seen here. But either way, whether the heat rises rapidly and cooks your cake quicker, the goal is to make sure that whatever is happening, your cakes are not affected adversely, whereas as in one cooks quicker than the other, or one is overbaked than the other. In this case, it's really not a great problem for me, so I am happy with the results I got in the end. And with that said, our cakes are baked and that is done. Hopefully I'll be back tomorrow or on Saturday to put the cake together, and then we can see the finished look. So wherever you are, consider joining us. Thank you for your time tonight, and good night, good day, good morning, and I'll see you in my next video. Oh, Andrew. Okay, I did say bye, but okay, stay in there. Andrew is asking if I have recommendations for beginner recipes. Look, stay on this channel. There are so many. All my recipes on this channel are beginner friendly. And in fact, if you have any questions, check the live videos. You will find that I have a ton of live sessions that I bake these specific recipes on the channel, that you get to see the entire process as we've done today. So check my live sessions. Andrew, this is for you. Check my live videos and you'll find that I have vanilla, I have red velvet cupcakes, I have red velvet cakes. All of those videos are there for you to check for yourself, and also use the recipes. But the recipes are very beginner friendly for you. So if you're looking for vanilla cake recipes, go back so you can check the my long form edited videos. All the recipes are very beginner friendly. And if you're new to the channel, you will hear the word adaptable. The adaptable is in tandem for beginners. The reason being, if you're a beginner, sometimes you can't be so specific and sometimes things don't go to plan for you. So my recipes are developed so that when you fall short of certain ingredient measurements, you still don't have adverse results. So check those recipes on the channel. That should be helpful, Andrew. Nana Wusua, thank you. And Katie, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and I hope I have provided you enough value. Do like the video for the last time before we log out of the chat, and for all of you who joined me today, thanks for your time, and I'll see you in my next video.